Welcome back to the Changemaker Podcast. I'm your host, Deke Copenhaver. And today my guest is my friend, and an amazing lady, by the way, Charmain Zimmerman Brackett. She's the publisher of Augusta Good News, thank God for that, a daily digital newspaper highlighting the quality of life issues in Augusta, Georgia. A lifelong resident of Augusta, she started her journalism career in the Augusta Chronicle's sports department, which I never knew that, while still a student at Augusta University, where she majored in English. She's written for several publications, including Augusta Magazine, the former Fort Gordon Signal newspaper, and Columbia County Magazine. See, I do want to know this. You said this might be too long. It's not, because I didn't know this. She's also authored 14 novels and children's books. Her first children's book, Little Pearl's Circus World, won the Georgia Writers Association 2015 Georgia Author of the Year Award. Come on, man, in the children's category. It's based on the true story of her great-grandmother, Pearl Clark Lacoma, who began performing with her father's circus, the M.L. Clark and Son Caban shows, when she was only 4. She started Augusta Good News in November 2022 and launched Inspiring Women of Augusta Magazine November 2023. In June, Augusta Good News received 9 Georgia Press Association awards, as well as the Greater Augusta Arts Council's Media Award. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome my friend Charmain.
Welcome to the Changemaker Podcast, hosted by Deke Copenhaver. Deke is the author of The Changemaker, a Forbes publishing book that has reached #1 on Amazon on multiple occasions and in multiple categories like management skills and total quality management. During this podcast, Deke interviews exceptional change-making leaders. Deke currently operates Copenhaver Consulting, where he helps local governments and other public organizations maximize their potential. He's also a sought-after public speaker. We hope that the Changemaker has an impact on you today and that you find takeaways that make you a better leader in your life. Now, here's Deke.
Hi, thank you for having me.
No, I am thrilled to have you here. I mean, we've had offline and online discussions that really, I think in today's world, it's particularly in the media, the idea is you always hear the catchphrase, if it bleeds, it leads. But I've found, and politically, and here in Augusta, people politically, media-wise, will go to an alternative. It's like, if all you're provided is junk food, all you're going to eat is junk food. But if you have healthy alternatives to junk food, I think most people will go that route. So how did you come to this decision that this was the way you wanted to go?
I wrote for the Chronicle for about 32 years. And in that time, I did sports and I did faith and food and education and all kinds of different things. And then there was an interim period when I was at the Augusta Press. And when I was there, I wrote a lot of the breaking news. So if I got an email, sorry, when I say these names, from Mark Bowen and Eric Abdullah, it got to the point where I just had a visceral reaction to those names. Because I knew that it was bad, whatever it was. And so I wrote a lot of those things, saw a lot of that. And I'm a news junkie. And I had to cut cable in 2012 because I can't remember what shooting it was, sadly. But I was obsessed, especially in the 90s, with the Columbine shootings. And at the time, there were 2 newspapers in Denver, and they competed. And so every day I would have this fill of the news, that kind of news. And after so many years, I realized that my mental health was affected by this, just the constant diet of bad. And then that stint at the Augusta Press, it was like, I can't do this. And my mother and my husband, I think, were ready to stage an intervention because they said, your health is more important than, and it was the mental health. And so not knowing what I was going to do, I had no plan except for I saw this magazine in my head and I was like, I don't know how to do that. But I resigned from that position as managing editor. And my daughter, her birthday's in November, and she takes the entire month. That is her birth month. And she, not married, no kids except a dog. And so she takes her parents on a cruise for her birthday. And so my last day was 2 days before we got on the ship. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to leave everything at the shore and figure it out. And I really prayed. I was like, God, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with my life. I'm not old enough to retire, and I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so I kept having this conversation back and forth, and in the seeing the water and the peacefulness, it was like, what do you know how to do? You know, this conversation going on in my head. What do you know how to do? Well, I know how to write. I can talk to people. I know how to use WordPress. I can do all these things. Like I said, that idea of a magazine was churning around. And so it was like, well, you worked for a digital newspaper. Why can't you make a digital newspaper? And why can't it be? And honestly, the scripture came in my head. It was like, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report. And I kind of condensed that, but good report. I was like, good report, Augusta Good News. And, you know, I've been a journalist all my life.
Yeah.
That's what I know how to do. So you do what you know how to do. I did not know how to build my own website, but I did. My last day at Augusta Press was November 2nd of 2022. Augusta Good News launched on November 22nd, 2022, and I built the website. So the idea was eventually to get to this magazine. But, you know, magazines, you might have 10 stories in a magazine, and there's all these things that happen. And in between magazine deadlines, and it's like, well, what would you do? You know, so that was the reason for Augusta Good News. Plus, the only naysayer, and I can tell you about that one later, but the only person who said that would not work gave a conjunction in there. But if you had a following, then you could probably make it work. It's like, okay. So to build this platform, so to speak, of good news to lead to this magazine, Inspiring Women, that's what I did. I started building a name, a platform, and then I had somebody before Augusta Good News even launched. I didn't know who he was at the time, but the first thing I covered for Augusta Good News was talking to him about my idea, and he's like, "You already have a brand." I was like, "Oh, I do," because you get in this space and you do your work every day, and you don't think about. I didn't think about what other people were thinking of me. You know, I just did my thing. I was out there, but people were watching me, and I've seen that really come into play over the past couple of months. People have been watching what I've been doing, and over the past 35 years, I have built a name. And my dad always told me that your name is important. Yes. A good name is important, and make sure that you keep your good name. And so doing the best that I could to live up to journalistic ethics and doing what I said I would do, you know, as best I could. And people have watched for 35 years, 36 now. They've been watching.
Well, you know, it's funny. I mean, because it's different fields. I mean, you're in the media, and obviously I was in politics. I'm not now. This is kind of my media experiment. But so after my book came out in 2019, I had a guy say, so The Changemaker was my book, but it chronicled my time in office, which I never went negative. I kept to the high ground. I focused on bringing people together, and it goes back to the good name thing. I had a speaking engagement after the book came out. He said, "What's at the core of your book?" I said, "Well, in leadership positions, even in politics, you can maintain your character and integrity and treat everybody with dignity and respect and still be successful." Yeah. And the guy was local. He's like, "Well, I can't wait to read it. I don't think that's possible." But it's almost like people are so jaded but the media is always this way, you know, the politicians are always this way. And I've often told people, I could not understand when I first was elected. I'm like, how do people that don't know me hate me? But they attach the typical politician tag to me. But I think, you know, you're doing something different, which it takes, I mean, that's leadership to step out in a leap of faith and say, and do not do what everybody else is doing. So I applaud you for that. And I love seeing good people doing good things, maintaining their good name and being successful with them.
One of the things that motivates me, and I've had people tell me this before, I think the best thing that I personally do is tell other people's stories.
Yeah.
So if I write a people profile, that is probably the best thing that I do. And I've just always had this idea in my mind that if we could sit down together, which is what I do usually with somebody.
Yeah.
I sit down with them, or I talk with them on the phone, or I do a Zoom interview or whatever. And if I can just have a conversation with them, and most of the time I start my interviews off with, tell me about. It's not a question. It's just, tell me about you. Years and years ago, I read How to Win Friends and Influence People. And that was one of the things that Dale Carnegie said. He said, you let that person talk about themselves. You find out what it is that they are interested and passionate about. And when you do that, you have made a friend. And when you share stories with other people, then that brings down some of those walls, because you see this is a human being.
Exactly.
And that I am talking with, and this person has a family, this person has hopes and dreams and goals. They have things they like, they have things they don't like. We're different. And isn't that what makes this world the great place that it is that we all are different, but yet we have this common humanity. And if we could just build those bridges and look at what we've got in common instead of. And so that's been my Pollyanna approach to journalism all my life. And that's what kept me from being cynical. And that's what you see a lot of journalists do.
Well, but I'll tell you, Charmaine, it's not Pollyanna-ish. So you and I were discussing before coming on air. So I've participated in 4 elections in Augusta spanning 19 years. So 4 elections, nearly 2 decades. 3 as a candidate for mayor, 1 the Augusta Stronger Together campaign that I just won, that I just was contracted to run, and we won. The mayor is a dear friend of mine, Garnet Johnson. But so that's a sample of showing positive campaigns that are uplifting, inclusive, that have intentionally bring people together on common grounds. You're not asking anybody to swear fealty to a certain political ideology. Yeah. It's crossing all lines of difference. And those campaigns are basically, if you want to work together to make our community a better place, let's do it. So those 4 campaigns, they averaged winning percentage of 64.75 over nearly 2 decades. So I'm like, that's a case study that shows people they want different. They want good news. They they just don't want the same old, crap that they get from the media. But here again, I go back to it. If people just assume we've made money off of this is the way we've always done things, let's just keep doing them. But you and I were talking, the mainstream media is losing market share now. Yeah. But it's like with the print media, you were part of it. Oh, digital's it's a fad. It's going to go away. Whereas most of the print media now, but it's just like, I'm like, they say that, the definition of insanity is do something over and over and over again and expect a different result. Exactly. But we just see that played out just all throughout, our nation and the world. And I'm like, when are we going to learn? Yeah. But we have to have pioneers in journalism like you are to show people there's a market for this. These endeavors, because everybody wants to make money, but you can make a profit off of them too, doing things the right way and the ethical way. Yeah. Yeah.
I write about people, but I write about events. As was in the bio, I won the media award for the Arts Council. Yeah. And they do a lot of great things in this community. The arts groups that we have, the symphony, the Augusta Players, the different organizations, they do great things. And there are other nonprofits that I write about, and we do sports. Yeah. In fact, my first place was in sports feature writing.
Really?
which I find quite ironic, but anyway. So yeah. So, and if you'd like it like this month, this particular issue of Inspiring Women of Augusta, it has women from all ages, from Gen Alpha. I have a 9-year-old who is she was born with one leg, but yet she's a runner. She does 5Ks And
really,
yeah. So she participated in the Augusta half 5K. With her dad, and so she's my youngest. And then I don't want to say anybody else's age, but I have somebody who is a baby boomer. I've got a story in here about Zan Colton. She retired, and so there's a story in here about her. So, and then I have somebody who's got a business downtown, and then I forget everything that's in here because I'm working on the other one. And there's a food column. People like food. And then like the new Miss Augusta is in here. So just running the whole spectrum of ages and different walks of life and different ethnicities. Because when you look in there, you'll see I've got somebody who's Hispanic and Black and white and all these women working together to make this a great community.
Yeah.
And it's not, those differences shouldn't be a wall. They just bring us together to make a better place.
No, but you made a very good point. And I think, I love that you're telling people's stories because everybody has a story to tell. But listening to this podcast yesterday, two Gen Zers, that one is a young man that I mentor, the other is a young lady that's a Christian influencer. But they were talking about how their generation really wants to hear stories because they're so tired of just the sound bites and the negativity.
Yeah.
But so I think there's looking at that generation, the market for what you do is just going to continue to grow. But everybody I listen to in the bridging movement that I'm a part of, one of the things, and you said the word, that we need to be curious about each other. And like you said, if you started off not telling somebody everything that you think and you ought to agree with me, it's like, tell me about yourself. Yeah. What is your story? Where are you from? Even what are your views? But how did you shape those views and form those views? I think that's, that is how we build bonds of trust through curiosity.
Oh, yeah. In my career, I've met so many different people from so many different walks of life, and it's been very interesting. I've lived vicariously through them and these conversations that I've had. And, it's just, it gives you a different perspective on the world if you can just see the world through somebody else's eyes for just a few minutes. And by having that conversation with them, I think I heard somebody say, we need more front porches. And rocking chairs so that you can just sit and talk to each other. And if we do that without all the noise of social media and everything else, then we can find some common ground.
Absolutely.
I think most people can find common ground with somebody else if they just take the time.
It's interesting from a faith perspective. Every day I pray, Lord, please continue to remove the scales from my eyes and the eyes of your people, and help us to see the work you're doing in the world, the rivers you're building in the deserts, just the beauty of creation, the beauty of people. But I do think, and along with that, I'm like, so that we can stop being distracted by the mirages and the illusions that are put out there that keep us divided. Because I was at a church service before I came over here, and the priest was saying, just out there on the street, I just don't feel this divide and I don't feel this animosity. And I'm like, but, there's great profit in business and politics from keeping people divided. But I think that's when you're sharing these stories and people can look at other people and say, we might be different in some ways, but there are some ways that we're very similar.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But I've always thought it's fun to try to find the common ground. And you mentioned, I'm like, music is a great uniter. I talk a lot about music on here, but when you're at a concert, you're not talking politics. You're caught up in the energy of the moment. So I just think we need more people doing what you're doing and creating those spaces where we can have these conversations, those front porches.
Exactly.
But so what is your distribution now with Inspiring Women of Augusta?
Well, right now, there's like 50 different locations in Augusta where you can pick it up.
Yeah.
So on the website, it's a free publication, paid for by advertisers. Hint. Anyway, but on the Augusta Good News website, there's a if you see the cover of the magazine, you just click on there and it'll take you to where they are. Now, that's where they start. So if people take them, they may run out of them. I know David at the Book Tavern called me like 3 times with the last issue because he kept running out. So that's where, and it's all over the community. Like the Columbia County Library has them. Fort Eisenhower has them at several places. There are multiple businesses downtown that have them. Doctors' offices. Just it's growing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, let me ask you this, because I've just your viewpoint on this. I just went on the advisory board of the Forward Party, which is a party that Andrew Yang started 2 years ago, trying to build a viable third party, which I fully believe that we need based on what we've got now. But Christine Todd Whitman, the former governor of New Jersey, is part of it. But we were talking about it, and so they're having success getting on ballots. But they said the more success we have, the more we're going to become a target. And I'm like, that's, to me, you almost have to get that point. I bet you're flying under the radar screen because this is not typical what you would think sells. But do you feel at some point, I mean, you may get to a point where people say, she's taking market share from us, she's taking advertisers from us. Are you going to get blowback?
I hadn't even thought about that. So, I think that there's room for all of us, I mean, we've got a large community here, and not every advertiser would want to be with me, I guess, which is fine.
Yeah. It's funny though, because I was talking in this church service today too, and I said a good friend of mine, Melvin Lowry, who used to be the pastor at Bell Terrace Presbyterian on the south side. I'll never forget, early on when I was in office, he said, we labor under a mindset of scarcity when we serve a God of abundance. And I'm like, that is what I've said about Augusta. That's what I say about the United States. We're a city, we're a state, we're a nation full of resources. It's just, but we labor under this mindset of scarcity that there's not enough to go around. And so I agree with you.
Yeah.
There's room for all kinds of magazines in Augusta.
I think so. I mean, because not every advertiser, it's not going to fit in every advertiser's budget to be in a certain publication. And I think that we all have a niche. And, I wasn't here to take away anybody's market share. I just feel like that this is an idea. I mean, I have people who say, you're the news source that I go to. I thank you for writing about this. Nobody else did. Not huge, but I feel like that I'm making an impact, and I have a niche, and I'm bringing stories that other people aren't bringing. And that's where I want to be, is to bring things that maybe not everybody else is going to see. And I feel that there's a strength there.
Well, and I mean, that's part of the reason why I do this, is it takes an intentional effort to cut through the haze of the mainstream media. And I'm like, so many of the things that I work on, going on the board of the Forward Party, or there's a group called the Future Caucus in Washington that's been bringing Gen Z and millennial legislators together for a decade to teach them problem solving and to basically, so that age group is getting more legislation passed in Congress than any other age group. But so many people I talk to about them, they're like, what? That's going on in Washington? And I think people want to know, because part of what I think good leadership is, and this is what I always try to do, is to provide hope. I think people, particularly today in the world, are desperate for hope, because they're just being pushed this message of division and be afraid of these. And, there's war here, there's war there. I'm like, the more hope you can create through what you're doing, I think the better. And I think it kind of, to me, I seek out good news now. I mean, I've been a political junkie, and it's not fun to watch what we're watching right now. But there's still good news out there.
Oh, yeah. It was funny when I started this, there was this person who said, you mean you can find that much to write about? And I just wanted to laugh because I thought, you have no idea. I mean, I can't get to everything that I would like to write about. And I like to write stories about people who've overcome things.
Yeah.
Going back to that hope, the first issue of the magazine that came out was a follow-up on a story that I'd written for Augusta Good News about somebody I know. She lives in Grovetown. She graduated from West Point, and she's an amputee. And she's also a world-class athlete in like 5 different wheelchair sports. And as I'm speaking, she's currently in Wales playing rugby. The life. And then when she comes back, she's going to the wheelchair games. But this is a person who she's overcome a lot of challenges in her life, and a Black woman too, a Black woman at West Point in the 1980s. That was not the easiest place to be for that at all. But telling her story, and then like I said, the young girl she has one leg, but yet she runs. And that's the word she uses. She runs. She does.
Yeah.
And she competes. And I told her father that I was putting her in the magazine. He's like, oh, well, she's already decided that we're doing the half marathon 5K again. And we're, going ahead and start training for it. So she's got this mindset just to keep doing these races and do longer things. And I like stories like that personally. I like to hear stories that I need to hear stories like that. Being raised on Disney and the underdog always comes out on top. I need those kinds of things because I feel like I am an underdog.
No, I grew up the kid that read comic books and thought the good guy always won in the end. And at 56, I still think that way.
Yeah.
But, I'm a walking miracle. I mean, I made it through cancer with no side effects from the treatments. I'm 12 months cancer free.
Yeah.
But it's being able to bless other people through the blessings you've been covered in. So a couple of weeks ago, I had somebody reach out to me. She's a local pastor, and she was telling me about a doctor that is a good friend of, she and her husband's here locally, who was just diagnosed with esophageal cancer. Yeah. And she said, I know your story. I think you need to be the one to reach out to him.
Yeah.
I'm like, all day. Mm-hmm. And so I called him and I said, how are you? He said, I'm very depressed and everything. But we had a conversation. He said, I was thinking about, do I stay here at the Georgia Cancer Center or do I go to MD Anderson? I said, well, I'm going to tell you, the Georgia Cancer Center is great, but if you can go to MD Anderson, it is where you want to be. He's like, that is, so helping him to make that decision that day. But just eating lunch with the group today, had an older lady that's a friend of ours. We've got a little lunch group. And she said, I just want to tell you, he told me, because he's a friend of this lady, how much he just appreciated that call.
Oh, yeah.
So these little things that, that you're able to, pass these blessings on, but that you're able to give attention to people that, it might not be your typical news story, but those are, the stories of hope and people overcoming amazing odds. That's what, personally, I think most people want to see. And so I've always said this, though, and I'd love to get your idea on this. So people are like, well, positive stuff doesn't sell. And I'm like, well, Oprah's done pretty damn good with it. But even when there's that level of success by doing stuff that's substantive, but it lifts people's spirits, why do you think people still go by this mindset that, once again, if it bleeds, it leads?
It's just conditioning, I think. And I personally have I've had to overcome this. My temperament is towards the negative. And I can't quote the study, but I read somewhere that it takes 10 positives to overcome one negative, and I watched this like with my own children when they were coming up. I could say how wonderful that they were. All 3 of them were dancers. I could tell them how wonderful they were, how beautiful they looked, how amazing I thought they were. But one person could come along and say something negative, and it totally deflated everything that I had worked for. And it was very frustrating to me, and I've been negative and I've been positive, and I like myself better when I'm positive, and of course, some people don't know that Pork Chop, the happy guy, is my brother. But when they find out,
local artist here at Augusta,
when they find out that Leonard Zimmerman, who does the Happy campaign, is my brother, they're like, "Oh my gosh, y'all!" So I don't know if because he can forgive me later. He also has an artistic personality, and it can tend to be a little more on the negative side. But he chooses to be positive. He chooses that. It's not natural for either of us to be positive, but the more you do it and the more you change your way of thinking, the easier it is.
Well, for our listeners and our viewers that are outside of the Augusta area, Leonard Pork Chop Zimmerman, you ought to Google him. He does a Happy campaign with all these stickers. He's an amazing artist, but he also had a movie come out about him that I was actually in, a documentary a number of years ago. But I will tell you, along those lines, it's funny that the conditioning part. So I do this daily meditation app called the Abide app. Mm-hmm. So today it was talking about negative versus positive thinking. Okay, here's a little exercise for you. Look around and see 5 things that you're thankful for and thank God for them. Then listen and hear 4 things that you can hear and say, thank God for them. Then smell and think of 3 smells you can do, going on down to, to 2 things you can touch and 1 thing you can taste or something like that.
Yeah.
But that's just a neat little exercise that you can do wherever you are. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, it takes being intentional to be positive, but it is better. I mean, I think I had a pretty positive attitude throughout my illness, but you'll appreciate this, Charmain. So when you remember when I was in office, you worked at the Chronicle, not always favorable to me, but the biggest knock I had was that I was too positive and I was non-controversial. And I'm like, to say that about a politician, I'm like, man, I'll take that all day long. Really. But but that worked for me. And I think it's just, it works. Positive energy sells. It draws people in. It's just, but we got to put out more of it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like-mindedness, that's, you attract. If you're positive, you'll attract positive people. And I would really rather be around positive people. I've been around people. And I'm a friend. If somebody's going through a hard time, I will be there to help them through it. I'm not trying to be insensitive or anything like that. But I like being around people when they're positive, and negative. And all this stuff that I see out there right now with the political, it's just like, oh, stop.
No, it is insane. But that's, God, going through cancer and through all the treatments, God gave me a spirit of peace and calm. Mm-hmm. And to be able to share that with others, was a true, true blessing because I saw to be able to, people who were way worse off than me, to be able to lift their spirits while I'm sitting next to them getting chemo for 4.5 hours. Yeah. That's a blessing, but, that's a gift too. Mm-hmm. But it's, as I say, that is, the negativity is too easy to come by.
Yeah.
It's just the easiest thing in the world. Oh, the world's going to hell in a handbasket. America's done. Democracy's done. I'm like, no. Everything ebbs and flows. Even our country and everything. But you can't stop believing, and you can't stop trying, and you can't let the critics and the cynics or the naysayers stop you from doing what you've done.
Yeah. And isn't that the American spirit too?
Yes.
That we pull up our bootstraps and we just go forward. That's what Americans have always been, is no matter the adversity, we overcome. And that, to me, that's what the American spirit is all about. You look at people and from different generations ago, those Yanks, when they talked about the Yanks during World War II, they were the get her done kind of people. So
and that's what I love. And I always tell people, the only power a leader should, concern themselves with is the power to inspire. Mm-hmm. Because nobody can do anything alone. But if you can inspire people, there's nothing you can't do. But I know that this is no that just would seem logical, but there's nothing inspiration about negativity.
Mm-mm.
So after running, 4 positive campaigns, I'm like, I want to take this national.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife's like, you got to tell people that being positive works. I said, particularly in politics, when the whole thing is built around divide and conquer and fear and everything,
Mm-hmm.
when that's been the norm forever, I mean, that is why I've got a 20-year case study to show that it works. And if you're concerned about winning elections, but it just seems so foreign to people that positive media or positive politics, it's just like, but that we've never seen that.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I've seen there are pockets of this in other communities too. I've seen it popping up on social media. So it's really cool to me to see that I'm not really the only one, but and there are positive stories that come on other media outlets. I mean, I'm not trying to say that they're all horrible or anything like that. That's just the only thing that I focus on, is trying to be positive. And I don't do a whole lot of government stuff, and I do some things that I call news you can use. And so this was kind of funny. There's a lot of road work going on in Columbia County right now.
Yeah.
And so every week they send out these lists of lane closures. So I thought, well, I'll run them because it's news people can use.
Yeah.
And somebody commented on Facebook and they're like, this isn't very positive to me. And I thought, well, if it can keep you from being delayed because you knew about it beforehand, that sounds kind of positive to me.
Exactly. Well, I will tell you, I think you'll appreciate this story. So in 2020, we've got 2 corgis. We had 2, we lost one, got a new one. But so in the fall of 2020, our corgi, Sarah Beth, was diagnosed with lymphoma. So we started having to take her to Columbia. There was no place to get treatment in Augusta. Every 2 times a month. So, I mean, our lives were completely disrupted, but we had never traveled with the dogs. But then we started finding hotels where we could take them and everything. So they were going to Charleston with us, to Savannah with us and everything. But like we did across the board, we got to be friends with homeless people in Charleston and Columbia. But also we would take them to Hall's Shop House, which is a nice steakhouse. I'm like, so it didn't matter if people were rich, poor, homeless, black, white, whatever. Those dogs became celebrities. And I'm like, so I don't care what you might not be able to agree on. You can all agree that you love these dogs and they've touched your life and their story has. So I'm like, those corgis became common ground for 2 years. And I'm like, that just shows me that there's humanity in everyone.
Oh, yeah. And we have a corgi, and you can't be unhappy around him. He is over the top personality-wise, and he smiles all the time, except when he's judging you. And then he gives you the side eye. But he has that amazing, he looks like he's laughing. It's great just to see him.
Well, so we've got a little clothing line. Hoss has his own, our corgi Hoss has his own hosswear, T-shirts and hats and such. But we've not really, I mean, it's just guerrilla marketing. Melissa sells the stuff out of a bag. But so I looked, and like there are 20 corgis on Instagram with 500,000 followers or more. So that tells me that cute little short-legged dogs are pretty big sellers on Instagram.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I love Hammy and Olivia and Max.
Oh, my gosh.
Max, the fluffy corgi. Yeah, I love those 2.
Well, we've covered the corgis. Maybe that's a good place to start winding it down. As we get towards the end, first off, where can people find you?
Me? Facebook, it's Augusta Good News. And the website is augustagoodnews.com. So that's a good place to start. My email is Charmain with no E at augustagoodnews.com. And then I'm on Instagram and Twitter or X or whoever they are now. Pretty much out there. I haven't delved into TikTok. It scares me.
Yeah. Well, but you do have a website too.
Do have the website. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the last question that I always ask everybody is, on a daily basis, what puts a smile on your face and brings joy to your heart?
Well, obviously the dog.
Yeah.
His name is Deke. We actually adopted him during the pandemic. I don't know the whole backstory, but he was surrendered to the vet. So we adopted him. He came with a bow tie. So I think that it was based on like Ducky from NCIS because Ducky wore that. And every day I exercise. That is something that is very important to me because I've lost a lot of weight, and I like to be outside and to walk or go to the gym, and that brings me joy, except when it's 100 degrees outside.
I agree with that. Well, and I think you and I, because you interview people, I'll tell you, good conversations are really, and making connections.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for being my guest today. You've been amazing. I'm glad we finally got you in here.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. So, yeah.
Well, so that is all the time we've got. We are dropping the mic and we are out. Hey guys, thanks for listening to or watching the Changemaker podcast today. Greatly appreciate it. If you're listening and you want to see the video, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at Deke Copenhaver. That's a pretty easy to remember, I would think. But really, we also want to remind you to like, subscribe, rate across all platforms, download. And if you're looking for a coach, a speaker, or anything, you know where to find me. Just email me at me@dekecopenhaver.com. And thanks so much for listening.